part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Chase Smith, founder and CEO of Press Play Podcast. You may have heard me on the Oranges Oranger Cleveland Browns podcast with Jeremy Powell, now wonderfully hosted by Holly Wetzel, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast with Sam Amico, or my own podcast, the Chase Smith Podcast. I wanted to take a few moments to talk to you about a brand new subscription-based podcast we're offering this football season, the Press Play Sports Podcast. This premium podcast feed will send all of the sports podcasts offered on the Press Play Podcast Network to one central feed. Yes, you can still follow and subscribe to all of our individual shows for free on every podcast platform. But if you wanted to consolidate your podcast feed and listen to them all in one location, the Press Play Sports Podcast is for you. I'm talking the Oranges and Oranger Browns podcast with Holly Wetzel and Jeremy Powell, Red Guy and Rhoda, Sable Brothers on the Baseline, Cavs on the Break, the Dennis Manoloff Show, the Ball Card Show, the Premium Fantasy Podcast, a Swing in a Tribe MLB podcast, and the Tim and Shipe Show, a college football podcast, all in one feed. All 9 of our sports shows curated into one single podcast feed. Out the door, you're looking at $5.36 a month after tax. That's $5.36, just about the cost of a drink at Starbucks. And this is only offered on Apple Podcasts. You can't get this anywhere else. It's an Apple Podcast exclusive. Just go to the search bar and search Press Play Sports. It'll come up and you can subscribe from there. We're excited to offer this consolidated, curated sports feed for you to enjoy. And as always, thank you so much for listening and your support.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. The producer for this show is Jordan Powell. Does a fantastic job. Thought we'd give you a bonus pod because the Browns did not play over the weekend. We covered their victory on Thursday night over the Denver Broncos. Speaking of that victory, it was supposed to be an enjoyable weekend for the Browns and their personnel and their fans worldwide. To a large extent, it was. The Browns had, after all, defeated the Broncos on Thursday Night Football. Backup running back Dearness Johnson was outstanding, and backup quarterback Case Keenum was good enough in a 17-14 victory at First Energy Stadium. So the banged-up Browns were able to go into the mini-bye at 4-3, not 3-4 on a 3-game skid. That's what I said to the listeners of my radio show yesterday, Sunday, because we're taping here Monday, October 25th. But I said that to the listeners on News Radio WTM 1100 and 106.9 FM. And then I continued by saying that the Browns had every right to feel good about how their game on Thursday went, how they overcame a lot of injuries. And, you know, it clearly was a group effort. And you know how you hear victory Monday following a Sunday? Well, the Browns could have treated this past weekend, as a victory Friday, Saturday, Sunday, given that it was a mini bye. So, yeah, everything was fine there. The vibes were good until however many people who care about the Browns, and I don't know exactly what that number is, cared to tune in to the nationally televised game in the early afternoon window between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens from M&T Bank Stadium. Final score, Bengals 41, Ravens 17. And all I could think of was, oh boy, that's not good news for the Cleveland Browns by any stretch. Joe Burrow, quarterback of the Bengals, had a terrific day, and Burrow's LSU buddy Jamar Chase had a ridiculously terrific day during the beatdown. The Bengals offense amassed 520 yards. The defense looked good. One of the defensive stars yesterday was former Brown Larry Ogunjobi in the interior of the line. It was, so bad for the Ravens that head coach John Harbaugh said, you know what, Lamar Jackson, you've had enough today. And Lamar Jackson was subbed out at the end of the game, not because of poor performance, just because the game got out of hand. It wasn't one of Lamar Jackson's better games, but he wasn't, terrible. It's just that the Bengals did a lot of good things, especially in the second half, because they had trailed, believe it or not, 17-13 within the first 2 minutes of the second half after the Ravens got the ball to start the half and drove right down the field in less than 2 minutes and scored. So it was another second half comeback by the Cincinnati Bengals. And that's why some people would say, okay, that this 41-17 blowout was deceptive to a degree because, it was condensed into one half. But I say, I don't care how you slice it. I don't care how you look at it. The troubling reality for the Cleveland Browns is that the Bengals are legit. The Bengals are for real. They're 5-2, and they lead the AFC North over the 5-2 Ravens by virtue of the head-to-head victory. The Browns are 4-3, and the Steelers are last at 3-3. I admitted on the radio show, I do admit, I didn't take the Bengals seriously until about, what was it, about 3:30, 4 o'clock Sunday after, because that's when clearly they were going to have beaten the Ravens. And, I initially thought what a lot of people did. The Bengals were, in their rebuild with Joe Burrow, the second-year quarterback. When Burrow's healthy, they can expect that rebuild to be accelerated. And he wasn't healthy for the entirety of his rookie year because he had that gruesome leg injury. And he's come back from it, and he looks really, really good. He looks like the number one overall as he was in 2020. But I thought the Bengals were, a couple of years from an ETA, if you will, an estimated time of arrival when they would be legitimate contenders. And I'm here to say I'm wrong, because when you see what the Bengals did to the Ravens in the Ravens' house, you couple that with the earlier in the year, the Bengals went into Pittsburgh and thumped the Steelers 24-10. That's enough for me. I mean, okay, 5 wins for the Bengals. One of them was against the Vikings team that may or may not be good. 2 were against bad teams, the Lions and the Jaguars. But as long as you have victories at Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and you're only into the season 7 weeks, that's enough for me to say you are legit and to be reckoned with. And that's, again, a problem for the Browns, because it means that the AFC contenders list added one more, and it just got more crowded to try to figure out how to get to the playoffs. It doesn't mean that the Bengals are invincible or that they're unbeatable or that they've arrived as in they're here to stay, because it's possible they could be knocked off their perch. We've seen plenty of 5-2 teams over the years fade, but the Bengals have every right to feel like they are legitimate. After the game, you heard at least one player in the hallway heading to the locker room at M&T saying, "New Bengals, y'all." He was yelling, "New Bengals, y'all." And I don't blame him. And listen, here's the thing too, because after I said these things on my radio show Sunday, got some texters and some tweets for that matter saying, "Oh, the Bengals, they really haven't beaten anybody, and you can't crown them yet," and all this. I agree that the Jaguars and the Lions aren't exactly impressive victories, and and I'm not crowning them, but think about it if this had been the Browns, okay? If we're talking about the Cleveland Browns and the projection at the beginning of the year that they were going to be in a rebuild and they probably going to arrive on the scene as a legitimate contender until a couple of years, But all of a sudden, the Browns went 5-2, and among those 5 victories were at Pittsburgh and at Baltimore, when the defense allowed a combined 27 points. We would be ordering Super Bowl tickets here in Cleveland. We would be declaring, hey, this team is it. And, the Browns are all that in a bag of chips. So don't be disingenuous and claim that we wouldn't be acting the same way as Bengals fans are now. Bengals fans feeling a lot of, confidence, having a lot of confidence in their team. Are the Steelers great? No, they appear to be on the decline. Was this version of the Ravens a juggernaut? Not really, not the one the Bengals saw yesterday, given that Ravens had squeaked by and barely beaten the Kansas City Chiefs. They should have lost at Detroit. They were lucky to beat Indianapolis Colts team a couple of weeks ago at home. So this is not an invincible Ravens team, but it is a Ravens team that had won 5 in a row, was brimming with confidence, was saying to itself, we can win no matter what the circumstances, no matter what injuries we have. We've got Lamar Jackson, the former MVP at quarterback, and so we're gonna win no matter what. No matter what it takes, we're gonna get it done. So to automatically dismiss what the Bengals accomplished yesterday by saying, "Well, the Ravens aren't all that. They're not as good as their 5-2 record." No, because you could argue that about the Browns. The Browns aren't as good as their 4-3 record based on Browns' quality of opponent victories. But we don't do that, though, and that's not what you should do in the NFL. When you're talking about the NFL, it's about stacking W's. Don't ask how, just how many. You can't control what's on the schedule. You just play the team in the current state that team is in, and you don't apologize when you beat them. Take you back to Thursday night. The Browns had to scratch and claw and just man up and figure out how to beat a Denver Broncos team that's clearly not very good. Had started the season 3-0, now 3-4 after the 4-game losing streak. After the 4th loss in a row was the Browns game. So, but I'm not complaining. And not a lot of people I know were complaining that the Browns won that game without a lot of style points. And we're sitting there going, you know what? Throw that victory back because it was kind of, it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. No, in the NFL, it's so cutthroat. And you get so few opportunities to win. You only get 17 this year, and that's an addition of 1 from the previous years. But there's a finite number of opportunities you have in a regular season in the NFL to win games, and that's why you cherish every one of them, no matter how they come, no matter who they come against, no matter what the state of that opponent is. And I'm sure that Browns players and head coach Kevin Stefanski would say they've always respected the Bengals and they know how good the Bengals can be. And, the Browns personnel would say that the Bengals playing well is not a surprise. Regardless, that has got to be a jolt to the system. What the Browns either watched on TV or kept track of on their iPads or with their data center, that had to be a shock to the system to see the Bengals win the way they did. And knowing that the Bengals were winning with young, skill position players, they were winning with a defense that's better than advertised, obviously. So I'm sure the Bengals or the Browns personnel was like, oh boy, we didn't necessarily think we were going to have to deal with the Bengals at the top of the AFC North. Well, now we do. And not only are you dealing with the Bengals in the run for the North Division title, you're going to deal with them in the wild card situation. if you aren't able to win the division, this is another team that's added to the AFC contenders list. And that's why it was kind of a, shall we say, disheartening Sunday afternoon, even as the Browns were getting healthier, as healthy as they can be with that extended weekend. And now they look forward to the Steelers coming to Cleveland on Sunday. It was tough for me at the very least, and I know there were others, to sit there and go, okay, the Bengals are here. And, Joe Burrow looks the part of a number one overall pick. Jamar Chase, utterly ridiculous game, 200-plus receiving yards for Chase, 8 catches for 201 yards and a touchdown. The rookie from LSU. Chase already in 7 games has a 100-plus yard game, 150-plus yard game, a 200-plus yard game, and for that matter, one that's 95-yard plus. He scored a touchdown in 5 of his 7 games, 6 total, 35 receptions for 754 yards this season. Already, 754 yards for Jamar Chase. And it wasn't long ago. In fact, it was the run-up to the 2021 NFL draft when I remember hearing the chatter about, okay, the Bengals have, the 4th overall pick, and the Bengals are desperate, for linemen, and their offensive line is patchwork at best, and they've got to shore that up. And Penei Sewell, the monster out of Oregon, is the perfect fit for the Bengals to help protect Joe Burrow. And I'm sitting there going, okay, yeah, but Jamar Chase is sitting there, and Jamar Chase is a special talent at wide receiver. So I went ahead and predicted from Cleveland. What do I know from Cleveland pertaining to what the Bengals are thinking? But I said, I think the Bengals are going to take Jamar Chase. And that's exactly what they did. And I'm not saying it's Sewell's. I'm not knocking Sewell. I'm not saying that he couldn't have helped the Bengals, but the Bengals recognized they had a chance to get a transcendent type talent at wide receiver, and they got him. And the payoff has been immediate. And unfortunately, I believe this to be fair, even though some will say it's low-hanging fruit for talk shows and even podcasts. I think it's entirely fair to say that Browns fans who see the Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase connection say, why can't that be Baker Mayfield to Odell Beckham Jr.? I don't shy away from making that statement. Oh, you can't do that. It's apples and oranges. Why? Why is it apples and oranges? I mean, why can't in Cleveland there be a connection like there is with Burrow and Chase? And don't tell me it's only because Burrow and Chase went to LSU together and that's automatically the synchronicity, the source of the synchronicity. Yeah, it helped, but there were plenty of people here who thought that when Beckham came to Cleveland, even though he had never been teammates with Baker and didn't go to college with him, that they were going to be able to form a connection, form a chemistry. And around the NFL, there are plenty of quarterback to receiver combos that are incredible that didn't require the two guys go to college together. I mean, the one that jumps out at me is Joe Montana of Notre Dame and Jerry Rice of Mississippi Valley State. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. You don't need to. It's a different animal entirely at the pro level. And so, yeah, did it help that Burrow and Chase have the familiarity from LSU? Yes. Was that part of what might have brought him in? Perhaps, even though I don't think Joe Burrow would want to say, hey, I had a say in that because he's a second-year pro and those guys want to stay out of draft decisions. But you don't need, it's not a prerequisite to have a chemistry as a quarterback and receiver that you have to be in the same college or you have to come from the same college team. When OBJ was acquired in the Giants blockbuster, we were thinking, hey, this could be instantaneous. It's not going to take any time really because OBJ is such a great talent and Baker's a number one overall pick in 2018. Well, these are the facts of the matter. in 28 games with the Cleveland Browns. 27 with Baker as a starter and 1 with Case Keenum as a starter. Odell Beckham Jr. has a grand total of 7 touchdown receptions. 7 touchdown receptions in 28 games. Do the math. That's 1 TD every 4 games. That's 4 TDs per 16-game season. Now we're at 17. So what is it? 4.1, 4.2 TDs per, or no, maybe a little less than that, actually. If it's over a 17-game season, it'd be like 3.9. Since the beginning of 2020, Beckham has played in 12 games and caught 39 balls for 545 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's yikes. In a word, that's yikes. And, you know, that's the unfortunate part about it, because a Mayfield-Beckham dynamic duo would go a long way toward helping this team get to where it wants to go. Can it be rescued? I guess, but I doubt it. There's nothing I've seen really since Beckham arrived that shows me that he and Baker are suddenly going to take off as a duo. But let me say this, though. While I'm talking about the overall lack of production from OBJ as a Brown, I am not criticizing OBJ as far as his competitiveness, his his desire to play, his willingness to play injured. None of that. OBJ has been very impressive as a teammate. He's been very impressive as again, in the football terms, warrior. He's playing injured this year. Thursday night, he clearly wasn't right, but he went out and played anyway. He and his buddy Jarvis Landry, both banged up, both played, showing the young guys, hey, if we can suit up and play out there, you can too. So I don't have any issues with Beckham as far as his, intangibles and all that other stuff. My primary issue with Odell Beckham Jr. is the tangible, the production. And that's where, I just don't see anything coming around anytime soon. All right, when we return on the other side of the break, we will talk the remainder of NFL Week 7.
Hi, this is Maria Gincola with Mindful MMJ Ohio. Did you know that medical marijuana has been legal in Ohio since 2016? If you have one of 25 qualifying medical conditions, you can obtain your medical marijuana card today. The most common conditions are chronic pain, including migraines and back or joint pain, PTSD, fibromyalgia, spinal cord disease or injury, and cancer. If you or someone you know is interested in learning more or to find out if you qualify, visit mindfulmmjohio.com and fill out the short pre-qualification form. The process of finding a physician, filling out paperwork, obtaining medical records, and scheduling an appointment seems like it would be a daunting process for most. But, lucky for you, Mindful MMJ Ohio will help you every step of the way to make the process quick and easy. In most cases, we can approve a qualified patient within 24 hours. And the visit is virtual, so you don't even have to leave home. So what are you waiting for? Visit mindfulmmjohio.com today. That's mindfulmmjohio.com. Let us help you be more mindful of your health and find a natural way to find relief from your symptoms.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Hello, this is Don Mike Mendoza, the host of the Producing While Asian podcast. Join us to listen in on conversations with everyone who identify from producers to non-producers who all are part of the AAPI community. There's all that and more on the Producing While Asian podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
This is Mike Voorhees, co-host of the Swing and a Tribe MLB podcast. If you love Cleveland Indians baseball, then this is the pod for you. We've got you covered each week as we talk about all the games, breaking news, trades, the roster, all things Tribe. You're going to love it. Go Tribe.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. This episode produced by the great Jordan Powell. We talked about the Browns as the lid lifter for Week 7 when they beat the Broncos 17-14 in Cleveland on Thursday night. Talked about the Bengals, fellow AFC North combatant, just taking apart another AFC North foe, the Baltimore Ravens 41-17 in Baltimore. And among other games, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers humiliated the Chicago Bears on Sunday afternoon. I think the final was 38-3 or 35-3, something crazy. I lost track. Let me just quickly call this up. But I watched it as I was in the studio for, getting ready for the show. And let's see, 38-3. Clearly, quarterback Tom Brady and the Buccaneers are playing a different game than everybody else at the moment. If the Super Bowl were played today, it would be a no contest. Brady and the Buccaneers would win. And I know they've got a loss somehow, some way. They lost to the LA Rams in LA 34-24 in Inglewood. They had to scramble to beat the Cowboys in the opener 31-29. They squeaked by the Patriots 19-17 in Foxborough in Week 4, and they didn't exactly dominate the Phillies. They won, or the Eagles they won 28-22 in Week 6. Still, to me, the Buccaneers would win the Super Bowl again if the Super Bowl were played right now. But thankfully it isn't. There's plenty of season. There's more than half season left. Tom Brady looks fantastic. Just kind of a run-of-the-mill Brady 4-touchdown, no-pick performance. And as I was watching this game on TV and listening to the CBS lead announce team of Jim Nantz and Tony Romo, couldn't help but hear how Romo and Nantz were, shall we say, pitying the overmatched Chicago Bears. I mean, Tony Romo was doing everything in his power to make the Bears fans feel like they were in good hands with head coach Matt Nagy, and this team doesn't quit. And, Justin Fields will have better days at quarterback. Oh my gosh. I mean, the Buccaneers could have dropped a 50 burger on the Bears easily if they would have tidied things up in the red zone. They were sloppy in the red zone, and I'm sure Tom Brady let some of his teammates know about it behind closed doors, but because he's the ultimate perfectionist, the ultimate winner in the NFL. Brady entered the game with 598 career TD passes, now has 602. The 600th went to Mike Evans. Mike Evans tossed it to a fan, and then the Buccaneers had to get the ball back, and there was a negotiation, and it sounds like the fan, got a couple of things, that were good for him, a game ball and a signed jersey and whatnot. I would have held out for at least 5 items from Tom Brady that were all authenticated. But then again, you got to be careful if you want to dig in like that. Maybe the athlete says, no, I don't really care about the ball. Then all of a sudden you're stuck. And, you want to try to pretend like it's this priceless item. But if the athlete says it's no big deal, then all of a sudden you've maybe overplayed your hand when you dug in for too much. But it sounds like it was a good exchange for the Buccaneers fan and the Buccaneers getting the ball back for Tom Brady, the historic 600th, because no one has reached 600 TDs. Brady, of course, the first. It's just a ridiculous number. It's an incredible number. And he'll just keep adding to it because he's 44 years old and he looks like he's playing as stress-free and as calm as he did 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. That's how much of a machine they've got over there in Tampa Bay. It wouldn't surprise me if Brady plays till he's 50. as long as he stays healthy, and he's done a great job of that. So you can't get rid of Tom Brady. And his Buccaneers are 6-1. Meanwhile, the Chicago Bears, somehow with 3 victories, they're 3-4. So that was one of the outcomes that jumped out off the page to me from Sunday's slate, because we have all but one game left. Tonight is the finale of Week 7, Saints at the Seahawks. But the other game that didn't involve an AFC North team that really caught my attention and caught the nation's attention, the Tennessee Titans 27, the Kansas City Chiefs 3. I didn't think I'd be talking about a Kansas City Chiefs team after Week 7 that was 3-4, that was embarrassed by the Tennessee Titans. But that's the world we live in. Patrick Mahomes looks mortal right now, which is odd. I didn't think that was ever going to be coming out of my mouth. I think that the Chiefs are, I know they're nowhere near as bad as they've shown. I give them a better than 50% chance of recovering from this problem that they've created for themselves, this 3-4 record. That said, there's some things there that you see and you go, okay, well, maybe other opponents are starting to home in on a game plan that will affect Patrick Mahomes more than we thought that he could be affected. And so perhaps there are some weaknesses to the Chiefs that are being exploited, when maybe after the past 2 years we thought they were invincible, and they're going back to the Super Bowl to get their revenge on Tampa Bay from last year. And then the previous year they've beaten the 49ers in the Super Bowl. So very interesting to note that the Kansas City Chiefs, the 2-time defending AFC champion, are 3-4 and coming off of a beatdown in Tennessee. The flip side, though, when you look at Tennessee, they're a handful. Did you expect anything less from Mike Vrabel's crew? Even though it wasn't that long ago this season that Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans went to the New York Jets and got beat. But you can never count out Vrabel. Back-to-back victories over the Bills at home and the Chiefs at home. So I look at the AFC and I'm thinking, all right, in terms of Browns, where are they and who are the contenders? Buffalo leads the East. Maybe New England's a contender. They're 3-4, but they're an up-and-comer perhaps. In the North, the Bengals lead at 5-2. The Ravens are 5-2. Then the Browns at 4-3. Tennessee leads the South, but here come the Indianapolis Colts. They won in San Francisco on Sunday night. They're 3-4, with Carson Wentz figuring it out at QB under Frank Reich. In the West, the Las Vegas Raiders are 5-2. They lead, but then the LA Chargers, who beat the Browns, are 4-2, and the Kansas City Chiefs, who beat the Browns, are 3-4. So it's going to be potentially difficult for the Cleveland Browns to get into the playoffs. If they don't win the division, there figures to be a lot of wild card traffic. And, I'm not saying I expected it to be easy or wanted it to be easy necessarily, because steel sharpens steel. But the reality is the Browns are going to have to work very hard to secure a playoff berth, given what the AFC North looks like all of a sudden, and given what the AFC as a whole looks like. All right, when we return on the other side of the upcoming break, I'll give a quick look at the upcoming 2021 World Series.
Hey everyone, I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Jeremy Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need each week to get you ready for kickoff and beyond.
Don't miss our breakdowns of each week's matchups, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we all know, Holly, dogs got to eat.
That's right, Jeremy. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading.
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
The sports podcast for the sports collector.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. Producer extraordinaire Jordan Powell is the man in charge. Thought I'd devote the final segment to looking ahead to the 2021 World Series that will feature the Atlanta Braves of the National League against the Houston Astros of the American League. Game 1 is tomorrow night. For me, everything runs through a Cleveland prism, so I look at it as Eddie Rosario's Braves against Michael Brantley's Astros. And particularly in the matter of Eddie Rosario, it's just, we said this on the previous podcast, one of the more remarkable stories in MLB. You could argue in history. If the Braves finish this off, regardless of what Rosario does in the World Series, if the Braves win it, the Eddie Rosario story in 2021 is one of the most incredible stories in MLB history. In January, he was signed by the Indians, 1 year, $8 million. Played basically half the season for Cleveland. Didn't play particularly well. Was on the injured list when he was traded to the Braves for Pablo Sandoval. The Indians also sent some cash to help pay for the remainder of Eddie's contract. So the Braves got Rosario, and they had to wait on him, or they couldn't be sure when he was going to be full go. Eventually, Rosario plays 30-plus games for the Braves, does a nice job, much better than he did for Cleveland in the regular season, helps the Braves win their fourth consecutive NL East title. And then Eddie Rosario takes off. Then it becomes the Eddie Rosario show. He has a hit in each of the 4 games in the division series against the Brewers. Braves win that one 3-1, and goes absolutely bonkers in the NLCS with 14 hits in the NLCS. 14 hits, including 2 4-hit games and was it two 4-hit games, 2 2-hit games, and 2 single hit games, as the Braves won the series 4-2. Rosario, of course, the MVP of the NLCS. And now the Braves move on to face Michael Brantley, the former Indian, and his Astros. The Astros are loaded. Their lineup is relentless, and of course their lineup includes Dr. Smooth, Michael Brantley. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Houston Astros win this series. I wouldn't be happy about it because I detest the Astros, and I kind of like the Braves. So I really want to see the Braves win, but I have my doubts. I think the Astros are a more complete team. I think their lineup is more relentless. And the thing about the Astros is they can compensate because of the depth of their lineup. They can compensate when one or two of their guys might go cold for a game or two. The Braves, I think, have more difficulty doing that, in part because it has to be mentioned. The Braves are the ultimate overcomers. They lost their best player, one of the best players in baseball, Ronald Acuna Jr., the supremely talented outfielder, to a torn up leg after he played 80-plus games. And so they had to revamp their entire outfield. That's why Eddie Rosario is here in the first place. The revamped outfield of Jock Peterson, Adam Duvall, and Eddie Rosario for Atlanta, all three of those guys were with other teams at the beginning of the season. So it's not the Braves' fault that they don't have Ronald Acuna Jr. He would look great in the Braves lineup for sure, and he would make me think, you know what? I think the Braves have just as good a chance as the Astros. But because Acuna is not there, and because the Astros have their guys in that lineup, I think the Astros are going to win the series. I pray, I hope I'm wrong. And, Michael Brantley is a cog in that wheel. I wish Michael Brantley nothing but the best, even as I detest his team. I've always respected Michael Brantley, the player and the person. So I kind of carve out an exception for my dislike when the matter is Michael Brantley. I hope my best wish would be that he has a good series and the Astros lose. But we shall see. One of these two is going to get a ring. Eddie Rosario or Michael Brantley would get their first World Series ring. 2 years ago, Brantley made the final out for the Astros when the Nationals won the series in 7 games over Houston. Eddie has never been to a World Series. He was with the Twins for the entirety of his career until he signed with the Indians for that 1 year this year. It's also a situation where either Phantom Phil Maton, or Josh Tomlin will get a ring. The former Indians pitchers, Maton, reliever for the Astros, Tomlin on the Braves pitching staff. I don't know if Tomlin is going to be part of the active roster, but Phil Maton, I'm pretty sure, is on the World Series roster for Houston. So even if they're not on the roster for the series, they're going to get a ring if their respective team wins. So the other part about this World Series that is fascinating to me, besides the ex-Indians, the two left-handed hitting ex-Indian outfielders who are playing prominent roles for, each of their teams, is the fact that the Atlanta professional baseball team is once again front and center. Now, the third consecutive series that the Atlanta Professional Baseball Club will be bursting through the TV sets with the name Braves, with a tomahawk under the name or city of their jersey, and of course their fans singing and chanting the tomahawk chop. And you say, well, that's what they've always done and whatever. And so what? They stayed the Braves. Well, it's important as long as you look at everything through a Cleveland prism, which I do, and you recognize that the Cleveland Professional Baseball Club in this calendar year punted on its name and has renamed itself the Guardians, and it got rid of the Indians largely because they felt pressure from a group of people who, we don't know exactly how big a number that group was, but the Indians felt enough pressure to change the name, get off of the Indians after having booted Wahoo the year before, or was it 2 years before? 2 years before, because they had to clear out Wahoo for the 2019 All-Star game in order for the MLB to give them the All-Star game or keep it in Cleveland. So Cleveland fans are watching as their team changes the name from Indians to Guardians, while the Atlanta team digs in on its name and says, we're not changing, even though Washington football team did it, Cleveland baseball team did it. We're not changing. And not only are we not changing, we're not changing our uniform, and we are not going to stand in the way of our fans doing the tomahawk chop on national TV. So it's just kind of interesting that you got the two contrasting situations, and you go, okay, the Braves are like, nah, we're not going to change our name, and we're going to keep everything as is, similar to the way the Chiefs did it and the Seminoles did it, the Florida State Seminoles, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Chicago Blackhawks. No, we'll let the Washington team and the Indians team as the two high-profile franchise. We'll let them make their change. We're going to stick with what we got. So in the World Series, you'll be, oh, and you're going, wait a minute. Is that supposed to be happening in today's day? And it's richly ironic. I don't want to misuse the word because a lot of people do. That of all places, Atlanta this year is in the World Series. When earlier this season, Atlanta had the All-Star game ripped out of its city and ripped out of Truist Park to go to Denver because of a voting rights bill. So the one team that you wouldn't necessarily expect would have a name that perhaps could be controversial, that team has the name, has the tomahawk visible on the uniform and the tomahawk chop while it's playing in the World Series. And so, that's just a side note. I wonder, though, how Rob Manfred's going to address that, though. I truly do. Because I'm one of those people who didn't think the Indians needed to make the change. I felt like they caved to public pressure. And, I hear people say now, well, eventually the Braves are going to come around. Eventually they're going to see the error of their ways and they're going to change. It's just that the Indians and Washington was ahead of the curve at that point. Well, you know what? Not necessarily. I'm not guaranteeing that Atlanta is going to one day change and Kansas City is going to change and Florida State will change and Chicago will change. There's no guarantee of that. But it's fascinating to me that the team that dug in, one of the teams that dug in, is front and center on the postseason stage for MLB. All right, thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate it. Thank you most of all to Jordan Powell for producing. Talk to everybody soon.